The printing press is often credited with sparking the scientific revolution, the Reformation, and the rise of literacy. TikTok is often blamed for shrinking attention spans, spreading misinformation, and rewiring how young people think. One is treated as civilization's greatest tool. The other is treated as its biggest threat. But here's the contradiction. They run on the exact same core mechanism. This video is going to show you why the tool that built the modern mind and the app that's supposedly destroying it are, underneath it all, the same invention. Imagine you are a farmer in medieval Europe. You have the most important idea of the century sitting in your head. Maybe it is a better way to grow crops. Maybe it is a question about the nature of the universe. It does not matter how brilliant the idea is, because almost no one will ever hear it. You cannot write it down and hand it to 1,000 people. Writing is not something most people even know how to do. And even if you could write it, there is no way to copy it fast enough or cheap enough for it to travel beyond your village. The only people allowed to reproduce ideas at scale are scribes working for the church, copying by hand, one book at a time, sometimes taking a full year to finish a single copy. This is the real problem underneath both stories in this video. Every society larger than a small group faces the same bottleneck. Ideas cannot spread on their own. Something has to carry them from one mind to another, and whoever controls that something controls what people are allowed to know. For most of human history, that control belonged to a small elite. Priests, scribes, kings. Whoever could afford to reproduce and distribute information controlled the flow of belief itself. That is not a side effect of the system. That is the system. In the 1440s, in the German city of Mainz, a goldsmith named Johannes Gutenberg solved this problem, though he probably had no idea just how far the consequences would travel. Gutenberg did not invent printing. Woodblock printing already existed in parts of Asia centuries earlier. What Gutenberg built was something more specific and more powerful, a complete system for reproducing text quickly, cheaply, and accurately, over and over again. The core of that system was movable type. Instead of carving an entire page into a single block of wood, Gutenberg cast individual metal letters that could be arranged, rearranged, inked, and reused. He paired this with an oil-based ink that stuck to metal far better than the water-based inks used for manuscripts, and he adapted an existing technology, the wine press, into a printing press that could stamp pages with even pressure and consistent results. None of these pieces were entirely new on their own. What was new was combining them into one repeatable process. And that process changed the economics of information completely. Copying a book by hand could take a scribe the better part of a year. A print shop using Gutenberg's method could produce hundreds of copies of the same page in the time it once took to produce one. The historian Elizabeth Eisenstein, in her influential work on the printing press, described this shift not just as faster copying, but as the beginning of a fundamentally different relationship between people and information, one where text could be standardized, corrected, and shared widely instead of slowly drifting through generations of hand-copied errors. The effects did not stay contained to books. Within decades, printed pamphlets were spreading religious and political ideas faster than any single authority could track or approve them. Martin Luther's writings, printed and distributed widely in the early 1500s, are one of the clearest examples of how this new system let one person's argument reach an audience far beyond what handwritten letters ever could. Print also gave science a foundation it never had before. When scholars could work from identical, error-checked copies of the same text, they could build on each other's work with much more confidence, laying groundwork that historians connect to the acceleration of the scientific revolution. But this new system did not just spread knowledge. It also spread conflict. Religious wars, propaganda pamphlets, and accusations of heresy multiplied alongside literacy and learning. The bottleneck had broken, but breaking it did not produce order. It produced both enlightenment and chaos, often in the same decade, sometimes in the same town. 600 years later, humanity would face the exact same problem again. This time, the solution would not involve ink at all. In 2016, a technology company in China launched an app that would go on to solve the same distribution problem Gutenberg solved, except this time using code instead of metal type. TikTok's real innovation was not video. Short video already existed on other platforms. What made TikTok different was the mechanism deciding who gets seen. Earlier social platforms like Facebook and Twitter mostly worked on a social graph. Your content reached people who already followed you, or who followed someone who shared it. If you had no audience, it was extremely difficult to build one. TikTok changed that. Its recommendation system, often called the For You feed, ranks content primarily based on predicted engagement, not on how many followers an account already has. TikTok has described this system in its own public transparency materials, and reporting from outlets like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal has examined how the algorithm tracks signals like watch time and rewatches to decide what to show next. This means a person with 0 followers and no institutional backing can post a video and reach millions of people within days. In practical terms, this is the modern version of what the printing press did for the farmer with an idea and no way to spread it. The barrier is no longer who owns a press or who has permission from a bishop. The barrier that mattered for the printing press, physical access to expensive equipment, has been replaced by something closer to nothing at all. Anyone with a phone can participate. The scale of adoption has been extraordinary. Research from Pew Research Center has tracked how quickly TikTok became one of the most used platforms among teenagers and young adults in the United States, reaching a significant share of that age group within just a few years of its launch. Where the printing press took decades to spread across Europe, TikTok's growth curve is measured in months. And just like the printing press, this new system triggered a familiar reaction from existing institutions. Governments have proposed and enacted restrictions or bans, citing concerns about data security and the spread of harmful content. Legacy media companies have raised alarms about misinformation moving faster than fact-checking can keep up. Regulators and platform moderators have struggled to manage a volume and speed of content no previous system was built to handle. The tool is different. The material is different. But the underlying event is strikingly familiar. A new system emerges that lets ordinary people bypass the traditional gatekeepers of information, and the speed of that bypass outpaces the ability of any institution to fully control it. 2 machines, 6 centuries apart. One built from melted metal. One built from ranked code. Now it's worth taking both of them apart to see exactly where they match and where they don't. Strip away the ink and the pixels, and both of these technologies are doing the same basic thing to the same basic problem. Before Gutenberg, distributing an idea to a large audience required permission and resources controlled by a small group. The same was true before TikTok, when reaching a wide audience meant either owning a broadcast license, working for a newspaper, or slowly building a following on a platform where visibility depended on your existing social connections. In both cases, the cost of reproducing and distributing an idea was the actual obstacle. The printing press collapsed that cost for physical text. TikTok's algorithm collapsed that cost for video content by ranking based on the content itself rather than who posted it. In both cases, the person creating the message no longer needed institutional permission to reach an audience. That is the shared mechanism underneath everything else in this video. Once you see that shared mechanism, the similarities start to stack up quickly. Institutions reacted to both technologies with alarm that came fast and hit hard. The Catholic Church eventually developed formal lists of banned or restricted books, known as the Index of Forbidden Books, a direct response to the flood of unapproved printed materials circulating after Gutenberg. Governments today have proposed or enacted restrictions on TikTok, citing similar underlying anxieties about losing control over what information reaches the public. In both eras, new voices without traditional credentials suddenly had outsized influence. Pamphleteers in the 1500s could shape religious and political opinion without ever holding formal office. Individual creators today can shape public conversation without ever working for a media company. And in both cases, the acceleration of knowledge and the acceleration of misinformation happened at the exact same time, spreading through the exact same channel. But the comparison is not perfect, and forcing it to be perfect would mean ignoring some real differences. The first difference is speed and scale. The printing press took decades to spread meaningfully across Europe. TikTok reached hundreds of millions of users within a few years. The compression of time changes the nature of the problem, not just its intensity. Institutions that had decades to slowly adjust to print had almost no time to adjust to short video. The second, more important difference is about who controls the ranking of ideas. A printed book, once produced, is fixed. It says the same thing to every reader, and no one is actively deciding which books each individual person encounters first. TikTok is different. Its algorithm actively curates what each specific person sees, adjusting in real time based on behavior. This means the printing press removed one gatekeeper, roughly the church's control over reproduction, but it did not replace that gatekeeper with a new one making constant, individualized decisions. TikTok does both at once. It removes the old gatekeepers of media and broadcasting, while introducing a new one, an algorithm whose exact decision-making process is not visible to the public. This difference points to a deeper pattern connecting both technologies. Every time a society lowers the cost of reaching a large audience, power does not disappear. It relocates. When the printing press broke the church's grip on reproduction, power did not vanish. It moved toward printers, publishers, and eventually toward readers who could now access more perspectives directly. When TikTok broke the traditional grip of broadcasters and editors, power did not vanish either. It moved toward the platform itself, and specifically toward the algorithm making moment-to-moment decisions about what billions of people see. The gatekeeper is never actually eliminated. It is only redefined, and each redefinition triggers the same two-part reaction: real expansion of who gets to be heard, paired with real disruption to whoever used to hold the gate. This is the pattern worth carrying forward because it will apply again. The next technology that lowers the cost of reaching an audience, whether that involves generative artificial intelligence, a platform that has not been built yet, or something entirely unforeseen, will very likely follow the same sequence. Distribution will get cheaper. New voices will gain reach they never had before. Existing institutions will resist, not necessarily because the technology is dangerous, but because control over the gate is shifting to somewhere new. Understanding this pattern does not tell you whether that shift is good or bad. It tells you a question to ask, not whether the technology is powerful, but who holds the gate now and who held it before. So here's the real question this leaves you with. Right now, in your life, there's a new gate. Maybe it's an AI algorithm deciding what you see. Maybe it's a platform. Maybe it's something that hasn't fully emerged yet. History says it won't destroy the old gatekeepers so much as replace them with new, less visible ones. So I'll leave you with this. What do you think the next printing press will be, and who do you think will end up controlling it? Drop your guess in the comments. I read every one, and I want to see what pattern you're spotting that I might have missed.